Let's see. We're working. Are we in business? Yes, we are. Today is day 500 of going live. This is pretty special, everybody. So today we're going to try to tie a few things together, kind of line everything up and do it all at once. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a property that has come on the market. And I'll show you what I'm filtered on. I'm just looking at properties that are 4 bedroom plus in the Birmingham market, single family homes, and properties that have been on the market for less than 7 days. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm specifically looking at properties. Pop it out for us so you guys can all see better. Hey, good to see you. And this is going to be good. So, what we're going to do is we've been looking at properties and we're going to look at these properties. We're going to analyze them as is, right? How do we get the rental rates? How do we understand what can we potentially charge for? Looking at the photos, what can we potentially renovate the property for? And then afterwards, if you've been following what we've been doing is we're going to add this property to our comparable sales list. So we're bringing everything together, right? If you're going to look at a property and you're going to spend the time analyzing the deal, you might as well go through all the scenarios that would make it a deal, quote unquote, right? And then also at the same time, you want to look at, okay, how am I going to add this property to my comparable sales list so that if I am pursuing the BRRRR strategy, right? What does the BRRRR strategy stand for? It stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And if I'm doing that, what the heaviest risk that I'm going to face as an investor is going to be, hey, am I getting the ARV, the after repair value, correct? Okay. Now, I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Day 500. Can't believe I'm here. So here we are. Now, if you understand what BRRRR stands for, it stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Now, the reason why we're tracking properties that are sold in the last 12 months, we're tracking properties that are sold in the last 3 months, and now I'm tracking properties that are coming onto the market today is because I'm worried about what's happening in the macroeconomic market. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So, if you understand how the 10-year treasury yield works in correlation to the 30-year mortgage interest rates, I want you to focus on a few things, okay? First thing is we're going to look at properties, the interest rate for the 10-year treasury yield for the last 12 months. And if you look at this chart right here, you can see that in the last 12 months, the 10-year treasury yield probably topped out around 4.6, 4.7, almost touching 5. And then it bottomed out to about 3.6-ish in September and October. And then it went back up to nearly 4.8 just a few weeks ago. Now, historically, the 30-year mortgage interest rates is affected by two things. One is the actual interest rate of the 10-year, which is 4.493. Okay, thank you, Euro. I appreciate it. And also, it's affected by the spread between a 10-year yield and a 30-year mortgage interest rate. So historically, that spread has been 1.5 to 2%. But we saw that spread go as high as 3%, which is why you saw interest rates nearly at 8% at one point, and that just drove the housing market to a halt. So the reason is if you're using the BRRRR strategy, right? So let's use an example, and then we'll tie it back to this. If you buy a property for $20,000, right, and you spend $50,000 renovating that property, well, you just created and invested $70,000, right? 20 to purchase, 50 to renovate. But if you're able to make that property worth 100 grand through forced appreciation with the renovation that you did, you now created $30,000 of equity. With that $30,000 equity, that gives you space, that gives you room, that gives you buffer. So now I can go get a 70% debt service coverage ratio loan, a DSCR loan for the home's value. So I can take back out $70,000, assuming the home's worth 100 grand. I can take back out $70,000 in the form of loan proceeds. And that allows us to reinvest the same $70,000 that we originally put in from the 20 acquisition and 50 renovation towards the next property and do it over and over and over again. And that's the magic of the BRRRR strategy. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is we save up money from a full-time job. for a 20% down payment, 25% down payment. And we hope that the property that we buy either cash flows or appreciates. Hope it goes well. And then we save up money again from our full-time job for another 20% down payment, 30% down payment. That's why I'm not saying you can't be successful doing that strategy. Lots of people have made tons of wealth doing that, but that's not as scalable in but the velocity of your capital is not as high versus the BRRRR strategy because you can take the same 7 grand doing over and over, but now you have to keep looking for new capital to save up for your next property. So that brings us back to this chart. Okay, because you just learn how important it is, right? The ARV is because that lender is going to give you a valuation. So today, if you were refinancing today, even though rates are a little bit higher, the value of the home that the appraiser that's hired by the lender to value your property might be based off of properties that have closed in September and October when rates were at the lowest. And when rates are at the lowest, right, affordability goes up because your payment is actually lower, and that allows your prices that are being sold to be higher. We're going to prove this out in just a second on the spreadsheet. But if you were to buy a property today when interest rates are 4.5 or 4.8, and even though you're buying all cash, you might finish that renovation in 3, 6 months from now. And when you're refinancing in 3, 6 months from now, they might be looking at properties that are being sold today with higher interest rates, which means your monthly payments are higher. That drives down your affordability and puts pressure on your prices of the closing properties. You change your strategy based on these economic data. What are different strategies that you use? I would change my strategy more so based off of what amount of buffer or what amount of hedge. So, for example, if you need, let's say you're on a $70,000, right, to buy a property, and you have a target of getting 100 grand on your ARV, right? So $70,000 in that case for your all-in investment would be the perfect BRRRR, right? Because then you take back out all your capital. For me, because I know that interest rates are so high right now, and if it stays elevated, I might say, hey, let me try to buy this property for 60 grand all in, including rehab, because that gives me extra 10 grand buffer. Because what if the property prices go down a little bit because of how high interest rates are today? Right? So I changed my strategy based on that, and that depends on how much buffer do I want to have in place. If you believe, right, if you believe that the interest rates will eventually go down because you believe in a policy or administration that's not meant to be political, then you might say, hey, let me, even though it's elevated right now, I might be willing to be more aggressive because I believe that interest rates will go down. So I'm going to have more buffer. So even though I'm at 70% all in, including my acquisitions and rehab, I might say, let me go take the chance now because I see more upside, right? A deal for you might not be a deal for somebody else. And that very much depends on your risk tolerance, your risk appetite, and what you are looking for your target returns. Okay. Now, one more thing. I'll show you one more thing. Bloomberg. I'll show you one more article that I saw, right? This is exactly why I wanted to go through the 10-year yield chart with you. It says right here, best, and again, not meant to be political. Just pay attention to what's happening in the sandbox so you can play within the sandbox according to the terms. Right here, they don't care about the Federal Reserve dropping rates because, again, a 10-year yield is what drives mortgage rates. So Besant has come out and said, hey, they want to lower the 10-year yield, not force the Federal Reserve to make a cut because the bond market behaves very differently. So this is something that you want to pay attention to and watch what's happening in the market. Don't put your head in this. Pay attention, especially when you hear these headlines. Watch what happens when these headlines come up and the effect on the 10-year yield. That's what you want to pay attention to, okay? Not all this doom and gloom thing in the world. I mean, a lot of people just don't follow it. And you guys want another podcast to listen to? Housing Wire with Logan Motoshami is great. He talks about the dance that the 10-year yield does with the 30-year mortgage interest rates, and that's gonna be a really, really good topic for you to stay on top of. Okay. All right. Hopefully that was helpful, Euro. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. So now the next thing I want to do is let's analyze this deal as is. So this property I found, it just came on a property 4 days ago. It's been viewed 284 times. Great. And if I look through the photos, right, it's a little dated. The bathroom is not modern. The floor is okay, but I would argue that you probably could use a better. I mean, I just wish they did a better job of taking photos. I mean, it just looks very just looks very cluttered, right? I wish they didn't show these photos. Kitchen is average. You probably replace auto appliances. So I'm gonna assume it's a full cosmetic rehab to say the least. I'm assuming everything else is working properly because someone's living there, obviously. So I'm assuming that the roof, the water heater, the HVAC is all working as intended. So let me see if I can read any comments. Plenty of storage, there's a basement. Okay, great. One garage space. Don't see that in the photos, but I will take their word for it. Okay. So now, if I go to this property, right, and I plug in the details right here, this property is listed for 199,999. 199,999. Okay. Now that I got these properties in here, I need to calculate my renovation. So let me delete this multiple by 3 because that was from yesterday's scenario. And let me go to my rehab calculator. And you guys ever want to see the full screen version, just go to youtube.com/@Kent_HE so you're not kind of scrambled to one little screen. All right, so in row 6 right here, I got 1,500 bucks for the roof repair, just in case there's any patchwork that needs to get done or anything that I can't see from what's happening here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside 500 bucks for some landscaping. That's in row 46 on the rehab calculator. Then I got for my painting, I'm gonna assume I need to repaint the entire house, okay, at $3 a square foot. This is 2760, 2760, okay? And then I'm assuming that the flooring is probably it could use a lighter flooring to make it look brighter. So I got $8 a square foot for the entire flooring for a cosmetic rehab. For this property, it got 2 bathrooms. I will assume one whole bathroom needs a full renovation. That's $8,000 in row 123. I'll replace the other toilet in the other bathroom with a high pressure flush toilet. I prefer using high pressure flush toilets. I never want to deal with a clogged toilet call. And I have pressure assisted toilets in all my other rentals right now. And just imagine if you called a plumber out there, right, to get something unclogged. That'll probably cost you 100 bucks, 200 bucks. And you gotta replace the toilet, that costs you another 100 bucks, 200 bucks. So I might as well spend the $450 now to replace a toilet with a high pressure flusher. That's my personal preference. Okay. Now, I am also going to add a cage for my HVAC system. I recently just had an HVAC get stolen at one of our properties, and I vowed to myself that I'm never going to let that happen to me again. So I'm going to put it in a cage, which costs about 900 bucks, and that's in this market specifically. It might be different by market, right? So I got that, and then I'll probably replace this with a new range and a new fridge, so stainless steel. I'm probably going to repaint the cabinet, new dishwasher. Great. So that and I got all these details in here. This gives me total rehab of about $56,000. Great, good enough. $56,000 includes a 20% contingency in case anything goes wrong or in case I get an oh crap moment where I open something up and I don't know what's going on. Okay. So now that I got my renovations in here, the next thing I need to do, I need to go get my rents. Now you can do it for two ways, right? If I go to affordablehousing.com and I go to the owner section and I go to the market rent estimator, I can come here and plug in the address, plug in bedroom count, and you can see right here that the average rent with 25 units within a 1.69-mile radius, the rent is $12.82. Now, the number you want to compare it to is you want to compare it to the HUD FMR. HUD FMR. FMR stands for fair market rent. And when you Google this, you click on the top link, right? And then you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page right here. Whoops. And you scroll down to the bottom page where it says access to small area FMRs. You can then click on look up FY 2025 small area FMRs, go to Alabama, go to Jefferson County, which is the property that this property is in. And you're going to see that in 35208, it's going to list out what your rent ceiling is by bedroom count by zip code. And you can see right here in 35208, it's 1580 for a 4-bedroom. So I'm going to write this one down, 35208. 1580, 1420 for a 3-bedroom. 1420, 35208. And this is important because here's the trap that most people fall in. Whenever they look up HUD FMR and they say, oh, 1580, that's how much rent I can get. That's not true. 1580 is your ceiling rent. So that's why you always have to compare what you see on HUD FMR and what you see in the market rents. Because there's a test called the rent reasonableness test. And for those of you that don't understand what the rent reasonableness test is, I'm going to pull up this PDF. This PDF is called the Housing Choice Voucher Program Guidebook. Okay. And if you go to section 2.2 of this program guidebook, right? Housing Choice Vouchers was previously known as Section 8, and they rebranded it from Section 8 to Housing Choice Voucher because of all the negative connotations that was out there related to Section 8. So they can get away from all those negative connotations. But this test is what you care most about, because if you are like other silly folks out there and you listen to certain gurus out there that talk about Section 8, but they never talk about this. There's like, go find an FMR, and it's like just that. That's the rent ceiling. That includes utilities. If you don't include utilities, you got to back out the utility allowances from that payment standard number. So don't be fooled, right? Please, please, please keep in mind this test called the rent reasonableness. In section 2.2, it says, in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA or the Public Housing Authority must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So this means you can't charge more rent to your resident simply because they are a voucher holder, right? For the obvious reasons. Now, obviously, size, unit type matters, right? But it is very rare for people to build 4-bedroom apartments. So I'm very confident that these 25 units within this 1.69-mile radius that we saw on affordablehousing.com is indeed rent for a 4-bedroom single family home. So that's why to use a more reasonable rent, I have to use 1282 and not 1580. Because if you use 1580, that could be the difference between you losing money and not and making money. Don't make that mistake. All right, let's cover all my other expenses. So for my property tax number, I'm just going to take that right from the payment calculator right here, which is 185. So I'll put in 185 in B28. And then I'm going to use 155 for my homeowner insurance that's listed right here on this page. But I'm going to do equals 155 times 1.2. And the reason I'm multiplying by 1.2 is because I understand that typically insurance companies view your investment asset as a riskier asset, right? I'm assuming that 155 is for a primary residence property where someone's assuming you're living there full time. But if you're using it as an investment property, they're going to charge you more. So that's why I'm multiplying by 1.2 in B29. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I am also going to put in 10% of my rent set aside for maintenance every single month. The reason I'm doing that is because, look, this money doesn't belong to you. Even when you get a new roof, a new HVAC, a new water heater, we know that a roof is going to get replaced in 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years, you get lucky. We know that HVAC is going to get replaced in 10, 15, 20 years. Same thing for your water heater, right? I just got a bill for replacing a roof on one of my properties in Arizona for $15,000. I got a HVAC stolen, and that cost me $5,000 to replace. Right? Something will always happen. And if not, then you know there's a future replacement cost in there because again, this money doesn't belong to you and if you don't set aside as maintenance every single month, right? Don't listen to people out there that tell you, hey, there's no maintenance, it's a turnkey property. That they're lying. Be very, very wary of people to tell you that. Because if you do that, you, especially if you're a long-term buy and hold investor, you would be underestimating your expenses and overestimating your profitability. Don't be that person. Please put aside this money because it's not money that belongs to you. Then I got 10% set aside for my property management expenses, right? Some folks will say, hey, I'm going to self manage the property. Great. But if you don't underwrite with that in place today, then eventually, well, essentially, you bought yourself a job, right? You didn't buy yourself an investment. If you don't underwrite with property management set aside today, then you can never get out of it, right? Because if the numbers don't work, if you without you hiring a third party property manager in place, then it's not really a deal, is it? Well, again, to each their own, right? Then I got 5% set aside for vacancy expense because every single home will eventually turn over, right? Someone's gonna move out of that home eventually at some point. Don't be silly. Don't assume 100% occupancy. That's not realistic. All right, so now let's calculate these numbers. In F19, I got 25% down payment. So my down payment in E19 is going to be equals to my B4, my asking price, times my down payment percentage in F19. So that's how I get to $50,000. I got 2% for closing costs, the $56,000 of renovation that we calculated together earlier. So in case six, my finance amount is going to be equals to B4, which is my asking price, minus my down payment percentage, down payment amount in E19. So I'll be financing about 150 grand. I'm going to use 7.5% interest rate right now, and let's talk it through, right? Let's talk about what that will look like once your interest rates go down, and let's prove it out, right? So if that those all the scenarios in place now, right? If I rent this property out as a 4 bedroom for 1282, I will lose, right? Cash flow negative $458 a month in B38. That means this property is a negative 5% return on my capital, assuming I bought this property for $200,000. Just going to round up here just to keep my life easier with a $56,000 rehab, 25% down, 7.5% interest rate. Okay. Now, again, this is not investment advice, not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just showing you all how to tactically update your underwriting approach based on your own criteria. Okay. Now, let's say my target return is E9 in E9 is 10%. What do I need to lower my asking price by to reach the 10%? So let's go down to $100,000. I am now at 0.95%. If I go to 70 grand, I go to 50 grand, I go to 30 grand. Isn't that crazy? I had to buy this property for $20,000 for this to be cash flow because the expenses are so high. That's crazy, right? $18,000. Out for all right, let's assume 9.7 and around 10. I would have to buy a property for 18 grand. There's no all right, I'm not gonna say never is never, but because of how high my expenses are every single month with my taxes and insurance at these levels and my imputed expenses this with my real of 56 grand, that's how much it takes, right? So 25% down, 7.5% interest rate, assuming everything else stays constant, and I'm renting out for 1282, I can cash for 496 a month now, and that's a 9.74 return. 9.74%. Again, I'm not saying 10% is a magic number, right? Some people might say, hey, let me just go buy property in Southern California. If I just make 5% appreciation every single year, I don't care about just cash flow. I don't care about any cash flow. I could break even for all I care. Because 5% of $1 million might be $50,000 a year. So they don't care about 200 bucks in cash flow a month, right? Because they're building equity and they're building wealth with 5% appreciation. And that's very risky, right? Because you're speculating on appreciation. But still, that's their own strategy. And only you can understand why you're pursuing a certain strategy with your own investment advisors and understand your own criteria. So let me do another thing. What if I can borrow this $56,000 from somebody else, right? And what if I borrow from a family friend and I can get it for 8% interest rate? Well, at $18,000, if I go borrow money for 56 grand a year at 8% interest rate from like a private friend, because I want to buy this property, even though I bought a property for 18 grand, I'm still not going to make any money. So that's how you mess around with inputs, right? Now I'll do one more thing. What if your interest rates go all the way down to 5%? Okay. Are you willing to pay more for your property? Now you willing to pay 25 grand, 23 grand. There you go. It still rounds up. So if your interest rate drop full 2.5 points to 5%, now you can afford 23 grand for the same property. But that's because, man, 1282 for rent is just too low, especially given how high the taxes number is. Obviously, you should double check your county assessor records before you close, but I think the taxes are just way too high here. So this doesn't make the deal work. You can cash for 498, but there's no way someone's going to sell you this product for 23 grand when it's listed for 200 grand. But at least now you know, right? Now you know. Now let's do one thing, right? What if I go in there and I realize, oh, you know what? The floor is pretty good. I mean, I don't think I need to actually do anything. I think I just need to refinish maybe 500 square feet Don't need to new flooring. May I just refinish 500 square feet of the home? Okay, now my rehab just went down by almost like 20 grand. So now with a 5% interest rate, right, what happens? Can I afford to pay more? Now I'd be willing to pay 53 grand, right? See what happened there? Increased my asking price because my renovation nearly got half with my renovation approach, whatever I learned. And now I'm still at 9.7%, right? But now my purchase price is $53,000, which is $30,000 more than my prior scenario because my rehab now is down 32 grand. Again, 25% down, 5% interest rate. I'm still assuming 1282 for rent with a 377 cash flow. I'm gonna do one more scenario here. What if you made the mistake of thinking you could get $1,500 for rent based on the HUD FMR that you saw? So you overestimate your expenses, right? 1580. So had you not learned about the rent reasonableness here today, you might think, hey, I can pay up to 90 grand and still round up to a 10% return. If I can rent this property out for 1580, right? I didn't even put any utility expenses in here. I can cash flow to 452 a month. That's a 9.5%, 9.6% return. Even with a $90,000 purchase price, $32,000 rehab, right? Same numbers from last, the 5% interest rate. And that's the difference between you learning about the rent reasonableness test, you thinking or learning how to analyze this deal properly, because otherwise you might have lost a lot of money not analyzing this deal properly. And that's what I really wanted to kind of share with you all today. All right, so now that we analyzed this deal, right, went to a couple scenarios, what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna waste my effort, right? I'm gonna put this property here in my comparable sales list because, like we talked about earlier for the BRRRR, right? What if I see another property here in the future and I want to say, hey, I want to BRRRR that property. Maybe it's a 3 bed, 2 bath, 2760 square feet, but I can see that easily I can add an extra bedroom. Well, I can go back and look at this property, see what it's sold for, right? You got to capture the same amount of details like year built. This is in 1950. It's 1950, 2760 square footage, 199, 999. So your dollar per square foot that this property is selling for, even though it takes a lot of cosmetic renovation, is $70 square foot. This was listed 4 days ago, so this is 26/2025. The lot size on this property is 9583. 9583. Yes, 1 car garage. Yes, there's a basement, no HOA. Let's see what community it's in. I just go to the map and I just zoom out and I can see that this property is in Bellevue Heights because that's the closest neighborhood here that's listed on Google Maps. Just don't Bellevue Heights. And this is very cluttered home, average kitchen, needs cabinets repainted, average bathrooms, one could use complete makeover, probably needs full paint job, cannot tell if flooring is okay due to clutter. Okay, now I got these condition notes to myself so that if I ever see another property, right? Because what's a perfect comp, right, guys? If I ever see another property right next to it, it's a corner lot, same square footage, same bed bath count, same year built, same finishes. I mean, that would be a perfect comp, but that's usually never the case. So as you go across natural borders, so just creeks, go through man-made borders like Interstate 20 or these large routes or main streets, you're in completely different neighborhoods. So the risk of you getting your ARV estimate incorrect based on a comparable sold property outside of that zone goes higher. So you got to decide for yourself, how do you balance, right? How much more buffer do I need for me to feel comfortable that it could be a perfect BRRRR? And that's something that only you can decide for yourself. Because at the end of the day, when the lender's appraiser comes to you and says, hey, your home's not worth what you're looking for, for the loan amount. What can you do? Well, you can go back to your own list and go back to, hey, like, hey, I saw this property. This property sold for X amount of dollars, right? This property was listed in 119 for $113 a square foot. Did it sell? No, it's still there. 209 900 has not moved. So you don't have a proof yet. Then you go back to, okay, well, if I go back to 3 months ago, what did I see happen in this area in 35208? Anything in Bellevue Heights? Nope, nothing in Bellevue Heights. So now you're trying to dig and understand what you can do to pull up supporting evidence to justify the value that you're looking for. All right. Hopefully this was helpful, everybody. My goal is for you to copy my homework today, right? Analyze the same deal I analyzed today using the same spreadsheet. If you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, just go to affordablehousing.io, not .com, affordablehousing.io. Go to the Get Deal Analysis tool. Plug in your name, your email, your phone number. That's the fastest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet, right? I didn't make the spreadsheet from scratch. I combined a few different sheets. I modified it, tweaked it so that I can analyze these deals as fast as possible. Because my goal is to avoid burnout. Because how do you avoid burnout? It's how do you get burnt out in the first place? It's doing a ton of work for no return on your time or your energy, and that's hard. It's really hard. All right. Thank you so much to all of you for supporting the Affordable Housing Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the lives of the past 500 days. I can't believe I've been doing this for 500 days in a row. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep changing things. I might not analyze the same deal every single day, but my goal is to keep going live for 1,000 days. And if there's any other topics or items that you want us to cover, let me know because I want to keep becoming the best version of myself. And I could not have done that without the comments from all of you. Today, I'm in Boston. I'm in the same apartment that I grew up in, the same bunk bed I slept in. And I'm just I'm just so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for all the support the last 2.5 years as we started the podcast. Without people like you, I would have never had the home I grew up in. I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. Let's keep doing it together. Copy my homework because remember, right? At some point, someone's going to ask you, why do you think this is a deal? And you can go to your own YouTube channel at that point in time and say, I know this is a deal because I've been looking at properties for the past 500 days in a row. Might that give you some confidence that you know what you're doing? I certainly hope so. All right. Sometimes I know the first step is hardest, and that's why I'm hoping you just copy more because sometimes it's just easier to copy before you try to branch out and figure out what you like. All right. So before we go, hey, new podcast alert. If you guys have not seen the latest podcast I did with Amy Kell, Amy helped housing authorities win over $172 million, 172 $172 million in grants over her career. And she came back out of retirement. We had a great podcast with Sherry, one of our top podcast episodes in the past when she came on, talked about nonprofits. And she said she learned a ton about grant writing from Amy. And Amy came out of her retirement just to come onto the podcast, but also because she realized she needed to share the skills and her experiences of what it means to put together a grant application package, right? Grant applications take over maybe $250,000 to put together sometimes. You got to get a lot of partnerships, a lot of relationships in place to make that happen. But again, it goes to show you don't have to just be a single family real estate investor and make an impact. There's so many career paths in the world that allows you to figure out who you are as a person, what's your strength as a skill set, and explore. And that's what I really want to do with the podcast to show you all if you're a project manager, you're in finance, there's a role for you in affordable housing. You don't have to be a visionary, you don't have to be a wholesaler per se. You can go find your own path. You can make meaningful impact and contributions to help whoever you want to help, right? You have decided who do you want to help and how do you want to help them. I chose to help families, seniors through housing. And I hope all the conversations I've had eventually inspires you to pick your path, because I know that at some point you're going to say, hey, that clicked. And I also learned the skills from the Affordable Housing Podcast to figure out how can I apply what gives me energy, what my strengths are, and share that with the world. Thank you so much, all. I hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today. That's what life is all about. All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for 500 days of going live. I appreciate you all so, so much. Thank you for sharing the podcast with your family and friends. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 501. Have a good one, everybody.